partial methods in C#. As in the last session, we have discussed about partial class in C#, to whom we call partial class. Partial class feature when it was introduced as a part of C# 2.0 and for what purpose. This all we have been discussed. Now the next we are moving ahead to discuss about partial method. Actually, C# programming language supports a special methods is known as a partial method, which contains declaration part in one partial class and a definition part in another partial class, or may contains both declaration and a definition in the same partial class. Basically, partial methods exist in the partial class or in the struct. A partial method may or may not contain implementation. If a partial method does not contain an implementation in any part, then compiler will not create that method in the final class, right? A partial method is declared with the help of same partial keyword as shown below. The big question arises why partial method need to have and what it does. That we have to understand, right? Observe here. A partial class or any struct that we have learned earlier, that is what is structure. A partial class or struct can contain what is it? Partial methods. Any partial class or any struct can contain what is it? Partial methods. A partial method is used or is created. A partial method is created using the same what keyword? Partial keyword, through which we have learned how to create a partial class. Right. A partial class or struct can contain partial method. Partial method is created using the word same with keyword, partial keyword. Let us understand partial methods with an example.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Observe one example of the what is it? Partial method. If anybody asks the question to us, hey, first tell me what is a partial method? What is partial methods in C#? So we can say C# programming language containing one special method, sir, called partial method, which contains declaration part in one partial class and definition part into another partial class, which contains what? Declaration part in one partial class and definition part in another partial class, or may contain both declaration and definition in the what? Same partial class is known as what? Partial method. In generally, right, in which you want to have in one partial class method just declaration, and then all implementation you might be have nothing but definition into some other partial class. How that we have to see the practically to. According to Microsoft, what is a partial method? According to Microsoft, a partial method has its signature. Signature is declaration defined in one part of a partial type, and its implementation defined in what? Another part of the type, right? This statement according to Microsoft definition. According to what is it? Microsoft definition. So best option, we can move ahead with the Microsoft definition. And before coming to partial method concept, people should know about the partial class concept, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's easy to understand.
Yes, sir.
And we'll see what are the restrictions, what are the guidelines available with the partial method. With the partial, what is it?
Method.
Method. Yes. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So what Micros is saying about partial method? What Micros is saying about partial method? Micros is saying that a partial method has its signature defined in one part. Right. A partial method has its signature defined in one part of a partial type and its implementation defined in another part of the type partial methods, right? Partial method has its signature defined into one part and of a partial type and its implementation defined into another part. Those we call as what? Partial method. Got your point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Partial method enables class designer, who is a class designer, to provide method hooks similar to event handlers that developers may decide to implement or not. If the developer does not supply an implementation, the compiler removes the signature at what time? Compile time. Got my point?
Yes, sir.
So what I'm saying that partial methods enable class designers to provide provide method hooks similar to event handlers that developers may decide to implement or not. If the developer does not supply an implementation, the compiler, when you build the application, the compiler, what it does, removes the signature at what time? Compile time. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now the next point is the following conditions apply to partial methods. The following conditions apply to partial
methods.
Methods.
What are the following conditions which apply to partial methods? Declaration must begin with contextual keyword. The name is what? Partial. The declaration must begin with one modifier keyword. We can say, what is it? Partial. So point number one, declaration must begin with the contextual, right, keyword. The name is what? The name is what? Partial. The declaration must begin with the what? Contextual keyword. What is it? Partial. And the second point is signature in both parts of the partial type must match. What is it? Match. And remember, the partial keyword is not allowed on any constructors, finalizers, overloaded operators, property declaration, or what is it? Event declaration. Only partial keyword is allowed on class to make a partial class, on a method to make as what? Partial method. Right.
Yes.
So partial keyword required to be applied on which one? Partial class. Partial, what is it? Class. And the partial, what is it? Method.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this thing we need to always remember it. Right. Now moving ahead with this, some more points to understand about the what? Partial method. So these two conditions apply, that you always remember. Declaration must begin with contextual keyword or modifier keyword. The name is what? Partial. And signature in both parts of the partial type must match. And what is the definition of partial method? Partial method has its signature defined into one part of a partial type and its implementation defined in what is it? Another part of the what is it? Type.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So hope it is clear.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now we are moving ahead next. I want to show an example without creating the partial method. And that example, if you can recall previous classes, already we have discussed in the partial class what we have method. The method having in one partial class with a definition and implementation. So that is called a normal method, not called as a partial method, right?
Yes, sir.
And partial method can be created where? Partial method can be created in partial class or partial structs. So here I'm saying a partial class or partial struct only can contain what is it? Partial methods. Right. In order to create a partial method, it must be declared first, like an abstract method with a signature only and no definition. After it is declared, its body can be defined in some other, right, in the same component or maybe some other component of the partial type. Partial type could be a class or could be a struct. And you know, a partial method is implicitly private. Implicitly, what is it? Private. It cannot have any other access modifier. It cannot have any other access modifier. A partial method can only have wide return type. A partial method can only have what return type? Wide return type, not any other return type. Got my point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That you need to understand. So here, I'll add some of the more points in this. The partial keyword, I can say note point. The partial keyword is not allowed, on constructors, finalizers, overloaded, declaration, or event handlers, or we can event not handlers, event declarations. So the partial keyword destructor, overloaded operators, property declarations, event declarations. Then where allowed only on the class, struct, and the method which is keeping into partial class or into a partial method. One point, a partial method is not required to have an implementation in the following cases. In the following cases. Case number 1, it does not have any accessibility modifier. It does not have any accessibility modifiers, including the default private. So by default, partial method is what? Private. You cannot define that any accessibility modifier, right? Because implicitly always private only. It does not have any accessibility, what is it? Modifier, including the word default, what is it? Private. So partial method is not required to have an implementation in the following cases. Next point, it returns wired. It returns, what is it? Wired. Next one, it does not have any out parameters. It does not have any out parameters. We have discussed earlier out parameters as a part of types of parameters in a method.
Yes.
It does not have any of the following modifiers. Any of the following, what is it? Modifiers. It does not have any of the following modifiers like virtual override, sealed, new, or what is it? One more there, external, etc. Any method that does not conform to all those restrictions. For example, public, virtual, right, partial, wired method must provide an implementation. See another main point, any method that does not conform to all those restrictions For example, public, virtual, partial, written word method must provide an implementation. So any method that does not conform to all those restrictions, for example, public, virtual, partial, wide method must provide an what is it? Implementation. So this point is very, very important. A partial method is not required to have an implementation. In which cases it does not have an accessibility modifier. It returns what is it? Void. It does not have any out parameters. It does not have any of the following modifiers: virtual, override, sealed, new, or external. Right? They're not required to have implementation. So now we'll see the example of this. Now we'll see the what example of this. So what example I need to show you? One class I'm going to create, the name is partial class. And partial class is going to have a method called, what is it? Partial method. Right.
जी सर.
Understood?
जी सर.
And I'm going to have one more partial class with the same name in another physical file. And there will have the what? The partial method implementation. Partial method, what is it? Implementation.
जी सर.
Got it?
जी सर.
Understood?
जी सर.
Yes, sir.
So here come to the code part. From main method, they all remove previous example code. Close, close. So it is a class file program.cs. Right?
Yes.
I can create one more file into this. Separate file I'm going to create in console application 1. Here add new item. Add, what is it? New item. Which item? Class item. Here name, I'm giving demo.cs. So create one class. This class created as a partial class. So you are creating here what? Public class. It is a not normal class, partial class. Public partial class. Class name, what is it? Demo. Class name, what is it?
Demo.
Demo. Right. In this class, we are going to have one method. We are going to have one, what is it? Method. So first public partial class name. In this, let's have one method. Let's have one, what is it? Method. Example, public, not public. I want to create a partial method. So using what? Partial keyword. And return type void. And method name what? Get data. It is just signature. Just declaration. partial void get data. This keyword partial using return type void is our method name. If you create as your here private, then error saying what partial method must have an implementation part because it has accessibility modifier. So if we are keeping the word any access modifier, then must have implementation. But do not have implementation, not use any access modifier. See this. A partial method is not required to have an implementation if does not have any accessibility modifier. Nothing but what is it? Even the default private also. If returns void, does not have any out parameters, does not have any of the following modifiers.
Yes, sir.
Right. So here remove private also not required. And this is just signature defined, not having any implementation. Not having any, what is it? Implementation. Now I'm going to create partial class demo only in another file. In what file? Another file. So here demo.cs available, physical file. I'll give the name as a demo1.cs. Demo.cs. You want to change the class name also with that? No. So physical file name is demo1.cs, and in that class name demo as a partial class with one method. Now in this project, adding one more new physical class file with the name of demo2.cs. Demo2. What is it? CS.
Yes.
And this physical file containing the same class. The name is demo by using partial. So here I keep public partial class name. What is a demo? Right.
Yes.
All right. And this create the one partial method with implementation. Right. So here I'm having what? Partial wired and method name set data. Open close. Here what? Have the definition. What come here? No definition declaration found for implementing declaration of the what? Partial method. So this is the implementing declaration of partial method. For this, no definition declaration found. No definition declaration found, right?
Yes.
So partial class demo, partial class demo. In one partial class demo of the physical file, we have method with the only what? Declaration, right or not?
Yes, sir.
And here creating one partial method with implementation. So for this implementation partial method, any declaration available anywhere? Not available. Available, but get data available. Not say data available, right?
Yes, sir.
So in order to test the partial method, right, we add another method and call this private method inside the what? Newly created method. Got my point?
Yes, sir.
So now what I'm going to do here, giving the error saying that for this implementing declaration of the partial method does not have the declaration found, right?
Yes, sir.
So here I'll change partial class demo, partial class, what is it? Demo. In this one declaration of the method having the what? Set data. Partial what? Set data. One more partial class with the same name, demo. In in another physical file. And here I'm going to have set data method. It is a parcel method with implementation. And for this declaration found, right or not?
Yes.
So here I'm writing a statement simple console dot write line. The simple message, this is a partial method. This is a partial method. We'll print this. Now I'm going to have here one method, normal method in this partial class, not partial method. That is public void set salary. Right. This is not a partial method. And because of this public, it can be accessed out of this class using the class object. But partial method are private, only can use in the partial class only for providing the reusability of the code, right or not?
Yes, sir.
So in this set salary, which is the public method, can we call this set data method? So here I'm calling the word set data method. Yes, we can call private method, can call anywhere in the class, right or not?
Yes.
And here some other functionality we can write.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So what it makes? It makes the reusability, right or not?
जी
Yes,
सर
sir.
Our class main method create demo class object obj demo, or just write demo one. All right, obj demo one equals to new demo, and here write simple obj demo one dot set salary method, right?
Yes.
This is
जी सर
no. But here not coming set data method because there is a word private. Private cannot be out of the class. Now run the application. See that. Coming, this is the partial method displayed.
Yes.
But this you could not access. You accessed what? Set salary, but set salary internally accessing what is that? That partial method, which is the private in default nature, right?
Yes, sir.
Clear?
Yes, sir.
जी सर
Okay, this is all about what is that? Partial
Partial method.
method in C sharp.
Yes.
So when you need a partial method implementation, and for that already declaration available, definition available into the one partial class, then you have to go for partial method. And it is what default in nature, so it cannot be accessed out of the what is it class by the object. Then it is required to be reused, right, into any other method of the partial class, which is the instance method. Since it's provided reusability, right or not?
Yes, sir.
जी सर
All right.
No, sir.
No, sir.
नो सर
Any queries?
No, sir.
नो सर
Okay, now observe here. One example I'm going to show you. Here I close this file. Adding in this one class file, right click, add. Adding new item, new file. So new item, class. Class name I'm giving what? Any name. Example I'm giving sample 1.cs. In this create one partial class, public partial class name sample, right? One I'm giving sample one. In this we are going to have one partial method, partial return type void and some method name. Any partial method name I'm giving display, and this does not have the implementation, just have the declaration of the partial method, right?
जी sir.
And below I'm writing as normal method, instance method, public void, and method name is what is it? Show or say print, open close. In this writing console dot right line of print method called. Right. Fine. And,
Yes, sir.
and in this print method, can I call this display method? Right now, display method is a private because kept with the partial keyword. By default, it is implicitly private. Private method we can access anywhere in this class. In this, I'm calling display. Right? Like this, we can call.
जी sir.
But for this method, do we have an implementation? No. In this first class, only declaration available. Right?
जी sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So now notice that the partial method is what name? Display. Definition has the partial keyword and does not have any body, nothing but implementation. Only the signature available. That's all. The implementation of this display partial method is optional. If we do not provide the implementation anywhere, the compiler remove the signature and all calls to the method. So here calling to the method. Implementation can be provided in the same physical file or in what is it? Another physical file that contain the what? Partial class. Right.
जी sir.
Right now, I'm not given any implementation. If not given any implementation for this, so compiler remove this one. Let's see program.cs. Here create the object. Sample one. Right. Thereafter, what is it? Object name sample one equals to new sample. So this is the object created of the sample one class. Now sample one dot this print method can we call?
Yes.
Yes. So writing what? Sample one dot print method. So public method can be called by using their class object. Now, if you compile the application program, for this not finding any implementation, simply it is marked as removed here also and from the calling place also. So application program runs a print method called objects. Print method called display. Print method called display.
जी सर.
Yes.
So when we run the application, we notice that we did not get a compiler error in spite of not having an implementation for the partial method called display. Since the implementation of the partial method is missing, compiler will remove the signature and to all calls to the method. That's what error is not coming. Now we are going to add one more class file, physical file. Add here new item. An item is what class, and the class file name is what jet sample2.cs. Right.
Yes.
Right. And here make public partial class. Class name is what available? Class name keeps sample only, right? And here sample. And here object of the what? Sample class. So one class only, the name is sample, but it is kept into two physical files by using the partial. So in the sample2. So now I added a class one with the name what? Sample2.cs, and in that we have one class, partial class sample only. Now what we are going to do? Here, the partial method what already declared into the one physical file. In this we can implement. How? Partial, wired, and see automatically coming display. Throw not implemented exception. I say no, implement it. So remove this. Right.
जी सर.
So display we can implement writing console dot write line of simple message. I'm saying, hey, it has been implemented. Partial method, right? Invoked this message to display. Now, if you run the application, earlier when you are running the application, only it was displaying what is it? Print method called. But now display print method called, and this display method calling, which has implementation to other physical file, this also will display from the main method when write sample1.print. So now run the application and notice the output, the parser method and the public method. Public method is what? Print. This method called and display what is it? This message. And inside the what calling? Parcel method calling. So this parcel method to this public method providing what? Reusability of the code, right or not?
Yes.
So at runtime what display? Print method called and display what is it? Partial method invoked the message display.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So
Yes,
a partial method declaration consists of how many parts? Two parts. One is what? Definition, nothing but declaration. And second is what is it? Implementation. Definition means only the method signature ending with a semicolon without having the method body opening curly brace, closing curly brace. And second thing is what? Implementation. Implementation can have into the same physical file or can have into the another physical file. Right, sir?
जी सर.
Partial method in C# are private by default, and it is a compile time error to include any access modifier by your own, including private also you cannot mention because implicitly private. The following code will raise an error Stating partial method cannot have access modifier or the virtual abstract override new sealed external modifier. So here on partial method, here I'm using the private, suppose by default private, but if you are using explicitly, then see the error. In sample 2, see this. Both partial method declaration must have identical accessibility modifier. Right. Save it. So here I'm going to have also private. So both plus given private, private. Then fine. Output is coming. But suppose in the sample 2, do not have this. In sample 2 5 for sample class not having the implementation. In sample 1, we have the partial method only with the declaration, means only with the definition. See this. Partial method sample.display must have an implementation part because it has accessibility modifier. So if you're keeping the accessibility modifier private, then must have their implementation. But if not keeping, then implementation you may have or you may not have, right or not?
Yes, sir.
Hope it is cleared.
Yes, sir.
जी सर.
Okay. Now observe. It is a compile time error to include a declaration and implementation at the same time for a partial method. In the partial class of this partial method, declaration and implementation both doing the same time. How? Remove this semicolon, use method body. Then see there is error. The code, this code, right, produce a compile time error. No definition, declaration found for implementing declaration of the partial method. So definition, nothing but declaration and implementation both cannot have for the partial method, right? Partial method return type must be what? Wired. Partial method return type must be what is it? Wired.
Watch.
Right. If you keep something other, like suppose string type, then see the error message. Right?
जी.
So what required? Wired.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. A partial method must be declared within a partial class or within a partial struct. A non-partial class or non-partial struct cannot include a partial method. Partial method only inside partial class or inside partial struct, but not into non-partial class, not into non-partial struct. Remember it. Signature of the partial method declaration must match the signature of the what? Implementation. So what signature of partial method declaration? When you are going to implement, either implementing into same physical file or some other physical file, signature must match. A partial method can be implemented only once. Trying to implement a partial method more than once raise a compile time error. Partial method may not have multiple implementation declaration. So here I'm implementing in the same physical file. Right. It is implemented. If I'm implementing one more time, right, not possible. So for second one giving error, what error? A partial method may not have multiple implementation declaration. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. A partial method may not have the multiple implementation declaration. That's all. only one implements, either in same physical file or into what is it? Another physical file. So generally required for what? Into the another physical file. If it is in same physical file, then not required to create partial method, just simply use as a private, and their code you can reuse. But partial method has special characteristics. If that characteristic requirement come, then you have to go for the partial method. Fine? Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this session also I'll share you. You can complete that by going through that. This example, what in the live session we have implemented, you also implement, and my point recall and check it what error coming by mouse over on that and understand and remember all this. So in the tomorrow session, I'm going to complete another thing. The name is what? Sealed class. What class?
Sealed class.
Sealed class. Why sealed class required? Anna, actually this is related to inheritance. So we'll discuss about inheritance also. Right. Then finally, I will discuss interface and the abstract class and abstract method. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then they all be completed. After that, we have the array concept, collections, right? Generic list, exception handling, like this we have to discuss. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. Once I'll complete the sealed class, abstract method, and another 2-3 more things are there. Then these all notes one by one I'll try to provide you. Meanwhile, I'm sharing the session. Using the session, you can complete the things, and the all example also can implement at your end. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Fine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So recall partial class and partial method. This session both get still some doubt, still an issue. Without hesitation, revert back to me and ask your query so that I can give you clear picture more and more about that. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.